When the Dead Attend and Are Welcomed by No Sleep Scribe. Welcome, listeners. Some people fear the dead. Graveyards, morgues, funeral homes. Some, though, find the living to be much scarier, which causes your heart to beat faster and your mouth to go dry. Tonight's story takes us to one of the sanctuaries of the dead and to a woman who belongs with them. Willow Jordan has always preferred the dead to the living. The morgue is her refuge, quiet, honest, and free from the noise of human cruelty. But when the silence begins to notice her back, Willow discovers a presence made from memory and stillness, one that has been waiting for someone exactly like her. So settle in, listen closely, and if at any point during this story you notice the room around you getting quieter, don't worry. It just means that the dead are listening too. This is a work of fiction. Please listen with the lights low. Listen closely. Sometimes the quiet listens back. If you enjoy psychological horror, atmospheric storytelling, and slow burn dread, you're in the right place. Welcome to Creepy Chronicles for No Sleep Nights. Stay a while, but be careful of drawing too much attention. Story written and narrated by No Sleep Scribe. Like what you heard? Subscribe for more original dark fiction. Leave a comment. What part stayed with you? Share with someone who loves unsettling stories. Content note: this story contains themes of death, autopsy, and forensic settings, emotional isolation, psychological horror, implied supernatural presence, and subtle existential dread. Listener discretion is advised. When the Dead Attend and Are Welcomed by No Sleep Scribe. Willow Jordan was much happier surrounded by the dead rather than the living. The dead were quiet, interesting, unintrusive. They didn't lie. They didn't judge. They never made you feel invisible. They answered what questions they could with a kind of timeless, patient honesty. Her job as an autopsy assistant was perfect. She felt calm here, peaceful and safe. She never understood why people were squeamish about the dead. It was the living she found repulsive. Their flapping jaws, pausing only long enough to shovel in food. Their self-absorption, littering and polluting as if the consequences were imaginary. Their unearned sense of superiority. They ignored the suffering of starving, homeless, ill animals. They abused them. They believed non-human meant lesser. Humanity was a stain upon the earth, and one day something would clean it up. Willow was never afraid of the dead. The only thing that frightened her was the possibility that one day the dead might feel the same way about her as she did about the other living. That was why the night shift suited her. After midnight, the corridors of the county morgue became a world set apart. Fluorescent lights hummed above polished floors, a thin, hungry sound that echoed faintly down long, sterile hallways. The world outside slept. Inside, the quiet bodies waited, and Willow felt home. She moved through the prep room with measured calm, gloved hands steady, breath slow. Tonight's intake had been heavy. 4 bodies already processed, another 2 waiting in refrigerated drawers. She didn't mind. She preferred it when the coolers were full. It meant there were fewer of the living to deal with. "Good evening, Willow," Dr. Kumar said earlier, giving her one of his strained, polite smiles, the kind people used when they were unsure whether the person they were talking to didn't understand social rules or had simply rejected them entirely. She'd given him the same soft half smile she always did. Harmless, unassuming, bland. Bland was safe. People underestimated Bland. Now, alone at night, she opened the stainless steel door of Cooler 2 and slid the gurney out with a practiced motion. The gurney seemed lighter than usual, moving with an unnatural speed. The clank of metal echoed through the quiet room, like an announcement that someone had arrived. The tag on the toe read, "Martin Hale, 47, auto collision." She tilted her head, studying the slack-faced, the bruised jaw. "So," she murmured gently, "what really happened to you?" She didn't expect an answer. The dead didn't speak to her, not literally. But sometimes, if she paid attention, the truth lingered on them, a pattern of fractures, a peculiar burn, a story written in flesh instead of ink. She wheeled him into the autopsy suite and began washing the body, careful, respectful, ritualistic, the way others might handle a sleeping child. It was while she was rinsing the dried blood from his hair that she noticed it. A smell. Not the usual stew of chemical disinfectant and metallic tang. Something else, like rain-soaked soil. Her hand paused. The hair along the back of her neck prickled. Slowly, Willow lifted her gaze to the reflective glass of the observation window. Her own pale face stared back, hollow-eyed and calm. Behind her, something moved. A shape, a shadow, a suggestion of a figure standing just at the edge of the surgical light's halo. She turned. The room was empty. Of course it was. The scent lingered faintly, almost as if it waited for her. A subtle smile curved her lips. "Hello," she whispered to the silence. "Are you lost?" There was a soft, nearly imperceptible sound behind her. Not a voice, more like the faintest scrape of skin against metal, a toe tag brushing a gurney rail, a shift of weight on a body that should never shift again. Willow's heart did not race. She did not scream. Instead, she felt something like relief, maybe even gratitude. Because in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that the world she preferred, the quiet, patient world of the dead, was finally beginning to notice her back. And somewhere in the cool, humming dark, something smiled. Willow went back to work, not because she'd dismissed the sound, but because acknowledging it felt unnecessary. If something was there, it would reveal itself in time. The dead were patient. She could be, too. She rinsed the last traces of blood from Martin Hale's hair, water sliding down the drain in thin red ribbons. The smell lingered, that soft, wet earth scent, stubborn and misplaced. It reminded her of a freshly opened grave, which, ironically, was not a smell she usually encountered here. She made a mental note of it. Unusual meant interesting, and Willow liked interesting. She reached for a towel and gently patted the skin of his forehead dry. It always bothered her when people handled the dead like objects. She placed the towel aside, paused, and listened. There it was again. Not a scrape this time, a shift, a hush in the air, like fabric brushing lightly across the metal. Very faint, very deliberate. Behind her. Willow didn't turn right away. Instead, she rested both hands on the edge of the steel table, feeling the faint chills seep through her gloves. Then, calmly, she spoke. "You can come closer if you'd like." Silence answered, but it wasn't empty. It was watchful. Willow finally turned. The autopsy suite lay still beneath its clinical lights. Instruments gleamed on trays. The other gurneys rested in quiet rows, draped in sheets like pale, patient waves. No shadow moved. No figure stood. Yet something felt nearer. Her gaze drifted to the observation window. Darkness pressed against the glass from the unlit hallway beyond. Her reflection stared back again, pale, composed, eyes too old for her face. The air shifted around her, not cold, not warm, simply aware. And just for the briefest moment, there was another shape beside her, tall, indistinct, head tilted toward her cheek, as if listening. She blinked. It was gone. Willow released a slow, steady breath. Not fear, more like the soft exhale of recognition. "Oh," she murmured, "so you're curious too." She didn't expect a reply, but the overhead light flickered, just once, a tiny pulse, as if the room were testing its heartbeat. Her lips curved, not a wide smile, just a faint, private one. She picked up the clipboard at the end of the table and began noting details in careful, neat handwriting. Unusual scent, present prior to autopsy, no visible source. Her pen paused mid-stroke. Down the hallway, a cooler door clicked. Slow, measured, like someone easing it open, one hinge at a time. Then, the quiet, deliberate whisper of wheels rolling across the tile. Not fast or clumsy, purposeful, approaching. Willow turned her head toward the door, listening, every nerve clear, every sense sharpened, not with terror, but with anticipation. Because finally, after all these years, she wasn't the only one crossing the line between the living and the dead. Something had decided to meet her halfway, and it was no longer pretending to be still. The report said auto collision. Martin Hale, 47, mild hypertension, seatbelt in use, airbag deployed. Unfortunate, predictable, routine. Willow didn't believe in routine. Every body had a story, and routine was just what the living called the things they didn't care enough to examine closely. She adjusted the surgical light, the reflection gliding over pale skin. Bruising traced Martin's jaw and throat in cloudy stains, purplish, yellowing at the edges. His ribs were a landscape of fractures, his left wrist bent at a strange angle. She studied the chest, listened, not with her ears, with that quiet place inside herself where the world narrowed to bone, tissue, and silence. Something was off. The fractures were there, but they felt wrong, not chaotic, not explosive, not the shattering violence of a collision. More like pressure, a slow, crushing pressure, as though the car crash were not the beginning, but the end. She leaned closer. That scent returned, faint, damp earth after a rain. Her hand paused mid-air. "Oh," she whispered, "you're still here." The overhead light pulsed once, soft, shy, almost polite. Willow glanced towards the observation glass. Her reflection stood alone, but the air behind her felt full. Not crowded, never threatening, just present. Her gaze lowered again to Martin Hale's chest. The bruising beneath the skin seemed to bloom in the sterile light, dark maps tracing across the sternum and ribs. Hands. That's what they looked like. Two of them with fingers digging in, holding. Not an airbag or a seat belt. Hands. Her breath left in a slow exhale. "Ah," she murmured. Her voice didn't tremble. "I see." She noted the pattern of hemorrhage, the fractures, the timing. She followed the story backward, before the steel, before the glass, until she found the beginning. Another stain left by humanity. Martin Hale had not died in the collision. He had died before it. The crash was an alibi, a false ending. Her pen moved across the page in neat, measured strokes. Suspected premortem asphyxia and compression trauma. Collision likely staged or secondary event. There was a soft whisper of fabric. A toe tag fluttered. Another gurney shifted, barely, as though something brushed past. Willow did not look up right away. Instead, she said softly, "Thank you." The room seemed to hold its breath. Then the fluorescent light steadied, a calm, content glow. She finally lifted her head. For just a moment, she could have sworn the sheet on the nearest body had been smoothed, like a careful hand had rested there. A companionable gesture. Her lips curved, not in joy, not in fear, just acknowledgement. "Don't worry," she said gently, to nothing and to everything. "I'll listen." Because someone had to. Someone had to care about the truth when the living refused to. And Willow Jordan had always been better at listening to the quiet things than the loud ones. She closed the file. Outside, the city murmured, restless, oblivious. In here, the dead, and the thing made from them, waited in patient silence. And somewhere in the dimness beyond the glass, the darkness leaned closer. Not possessive, not predatory, just interested. As if the first word of a long conversation had finally been spoken. And Willow was the only one willing and able to answer back. The first time Willow noticed the change, it was easy to dismiss. A coincidence, a trick of habit, nothing more. She was washing her hands at the scrub sink, the harsh antiseptic stinging faintly. The water pressure here was never consistent, sputtering, sighing, occasionally steady. Tonight it ran smooth and even, warm instead of sterile. It felt good as her hands had felt much colder than usual lately. Comfortable, pleasant. She turned the handle to shut it off. The water stopped immediately. No drip, no lingering trickle. Just obedient silence and a faint sense of welcome. Willow tilted her head slightly. Then she smiled. "Thank you," she murmured. The fluorescent light above her hummed in response. Soft, content, like a cat. These moments grew slowly, never dramatic, never intrusive, just attentive. A scalpel sat at a perfect angle on the tray before she reached for it. A sheet smoothed before she touched it. A cooler door already open when she turned towards it. The air shifted around her, not cold, not warm, simply aware, like the room remembered her shape, like it wanted to be ready. She found herself speaking more often now, not out loud at first, just in thought. Observations, questions, gratitude. The presence never answered in words, but the replies were unmistakable. Lights that steadied, machines that quieted, the subtle shift of shadow, the faintest breath of still air. She kept forgetting to eat lunch. The companionship of the presence was all she needed. Not possessive, just close. The dreams began on a Wednesday. She didn't remember falling asleep. She only remembered waking up into them. She stood in a corridor that she recognized but had never seen. White tile, muted lights, endless rows of stainless steel drawers stretching into a soft, hazy distance. The air shimmered faintly with the scent of rain and earth. No bodies yet, just expectation. A gentle presence beside her, not a figure, not a face, simply the sensation of someone standing very still, very near. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. "Is this yours?" she asked quietly. The silence warmed, welcoming, peaceful, a home without doors. She walked. Her footsteps made no sound. Neither did the presence. But it matched her pace with a tenderness that bordered on reverence. Whenever her path curved, the world curved with her, as though the hallway itself adjusted to keep them side by side. She felt something she hadn't felt since childhood. Not joy, not safety. Belonging. And when she finally opened her eyes in the afternoon, the bedside clock blinking 3:17 p.m., she did not feel startled. She felt missed, as though waking had pulled her away from somewhere she had been expected to stay. The world of the living began to fade at the edges. Not all at once, just quietly. People's voices sounded farther away. Their movements felt frantic, clumsy, needlessly loud. She had to remind herself to breathe. She still did her job, still nodded, still spoke when spoken to. But she did not return to their world when the night ended. Not really. Her thoughts drifted back to the cool rooms and humming lights, to the way the silence there seemed to lean toward her instead of away, to the steady awareness that wrapped around her like a soft, neutral embrace. The presence had no heartbeat, but if it did, she thought, it might match hers. Fainter and slower than it used to be, but a steady beat nonetheless. One night, as she stood alone in the autopsy suite, Willow reached out without thinking and rested her gloved hand on the cold steel table. "I don't like leaving," she said softly. The light above her brightened, just a little, as though the room were smiling. Her chest unclenched, a quiet relief, because she realized something she should have recognized long before. She wasn't simply working here. She was being attended, not watched, not haunted, attended, and the presence was learning what it meant to care, slowly, curiously, devoted in a way the living never were. It did not ask, it did not demand, it simply stayed. And though Willow would never have admitted it out loud, she was grateful for that too. Grateful, and no longer entirely certain that the boundary between them still mattered, or that she wanted it to. Willow dreamed again, not the vague watercolor kind of dream that dissolves upon waking, but something sharper, something that felt less like sleep and more like relocation. She stood beneath a sky the color of old bruises. No sun, no moon, only a dim, colorless light, as if the air remembered daylight and was trying to imitate it. The ground under her bare feet was neither stone nor soil. It felt soft, spongy, like wet earth that had never dried. A thin mist twisted across the surface in slow living curls. She exhaled, and her breath mingled with it. There were shapes in the distance, structures that might once have been buildings, now sagging silhouettes, their edges frayed like cloth left too long in the weather. She knew this place, or rather, a part of her recognized it. Willow. The voice did not ripple through the air. It bloomed directly behind her ear. She turned. He waited only a few feet away. She could not see his face. There was always shadow there, a deliberate obscurity. But she sensed height, the vague contour of shoulders, the faint impression of a man who had been handsome once, in that quiet, forgettable way that lives in the background of group photos. Only now there was nothing forgettable about him. He radiated presence, warmth without heat, gravity without mass, and above all, attention, all of it focused on her. "You came back," he said, not with surprise, but with satisfaction. Her heart did not stutter. It simply acknowledged him. "Did I leave?" she asked. The corners of his unseen mouth seemed to tilt. "Unlike the rest of us, you do leave. I find you in the places where the living store our remains. You need to stay here, where you belong." Her gaze drifted around them. The land stretched outward in a wide, fog-draped plain. There were paths, not carved but worn, as though countless feet had traveled them before her. Figures moved faintly through the mist, at a distance, slow shapes without urgency. She realized with quiet clarity that she was walking the threshold between memory and decay, a place the dead passed through on their way to becoming stories. "What is this place?" she whispered. "A kindness," he said, "a place of dreams and memories, knowledge and peace." There was no boast in his tone, only certainty. A silence followed, comfortable, unforced. He stepped closer, and she noticed that the mist bent slightly around him, as though unwilling to touch his form without permission. "And you?" she asked. "What are you?" He considered her. There was the sense of someone choosing each word carefully, like selecting tools for delicate work. "I am a gathering," he said at last, "a remembering, a place where the forgotten begin to speak to one another. They made me from all the endings people tried not to see. And because you see them too," his voice softened, "I see you." Willow swallowed. No one had ever said that to her before. Not her parents, not co-workers, not lovers, however briefly they had existed. He moved nearer still, until she could sense the outline of a hand lifting, hesitating, hovering just beyond her cheek. He didn't touch her, but she felt the idea of a touch, a warm pressure, gentle, reverent. "You are kind to us," he murmured. "You are careful. You do not lie to the dead. Do you know how rare that is?" A faint shiver traced her spine. "I don't pity you," she said quietly. "I simply don't think death is the worst thing that happens to people, and I don't think it is a reason to mourn." His attention deepened. She felt wrapped in it, like a cloak pulled close. "Yes," he breathed. "Exactly." The mist stirred, thickening around their feet. The faint figures at the edges of sight seemed to pause in their drifting, not approaching, not retreating, as though they respected the moment, as though they were listening too. He spoke again, and this time there was something edged beneath the calm. Not danger, not yet, but attachment. "You are different, Willow Jordan. You do not look away. And so, when the others chose me, when we became this," a slow exhale, "I chose you." Her pulse fluttered, light and erratic, like a moth brushing glass. "Why?" she asked. His answer was almost tender. "We do not often feel the absence of the living," he said quietly. "But when you leave, the stillness notices." And then the world shifted, not violently, not with shock, but with the slow inevitability of drifting into deeper water. The sky darkened, the plain expanded, and the dream did not end. When Willow Jordan did not show up to her 11 p.m. shift at the morgue, Dr. Kumar was immediately worried. She always arrived early, stayed late, preferring the morgue to the outside world. She never called in sick, never took personal time, never mentioned family or friends or lovers. She lived for the morgue and the dead she carefully tended. By 5 a.m., Willow was back, on a gurney this time. Her autopsy showed no abnormal findings. She was in perfect health, just dead. And the morgue smelled like rain-soaked soil, like someone or something had leaned close, waiting, patient, and finally, quietly acknowledging her.